Welcome to FCLE Seminar, the Florida Civic Literacy Exam Podcast. I'm your host, Mercedes Musto. Today we are tackling landmark Supreme Court case Tinker versus Des Moines, 1969. This is all based on the guide put together by the Florida Department of Education. Hey, I've got links to that study stuff in the show notes, so check those out at FCLE Seminar on Spotify and YouTube. Got it? Good. Hey, great. Let's get started. Landmark Supreme Court case number 13, Tinker versus Des Moines, 1969. Case background. Picture this. In 1965, a group of students in Des Moines, Iowa, decided to wear black armbands to school to protest against the Vietnam War. Well, I mean like to silent protest in a symbolic expression way. So when the admin of the school found out about this black armband wearing silent protest, they were like, that sounds like it could possibly be a disruption to the learning environment. So, hey, kids, if you wear those armbands, you will be suspended, period. Well, naturally, a few students defied admin's warning not to cause a potential school disruption. And those three students, Mary Beth Tinker, Christopher Eckhart, and John Tinker, did indeed wear the armbands and were suspended. This sparked a legal battle that was dismissed by the district court, then ultimately reached the Supreme Court. So the central question before the justices of the court became, at a public school, is the ban against wearing armbands a violation of the students' First Amendment rights? You know, the First Amendment, the one that guarantees the freedom of speech. The court's decision. In a majority 7-2 decision, the Supreme Court sided with the students. It was the opinion of the majority that the students or faculty don't, quote, shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate, end quote. Justice Fortas emphasized that the students' protests of wearing black armbands did indeed constitute a form of symbolic speech, which is pure speech and in turn protected by the First Amendment. The court did recognize that the students' intent was to maintain order in a learning environment and did fear possible disruption. Further explanation by the court was that there was a difference between fear of potential disruption and actual substantial disruption to school activities. Now, there were concurring and dissenting opinions as always. In essence, the majority ruling acknowledged that schools have a legitimate interest in maintaining a productive learning environment. However, it emphasized that this interest must be balanced with students' right to express themselves as guaranteed by the First Amendment. The dissenting opinion also highlighted the importance of maintaining an orderly learning environment and argued that school officials should have a broader authority, to address disruptions, even if they are perceived rather than actual. The constitutional principle. We're talking about the First Amendment here. The First Amendment states that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The Tinker versus Des Moines case helps us think about the First Amendment, and really, really think about it. It affirms the rights of students to express themselves freely, even on controversial issues such as the Vietnam War, as long as their speech doesn't substantially or materially disrupt the educational process as stated by the justices of the Supreme Court. On a side note, this is a simplified version. The actual case is complex and involves in-depth legal arguments. In fact, I can say that about all of the previous cases too. Very complex, but hey, this should be just enough to get you prepared for the test. And you know what? You're doing great. Are you sure you haven't considered law school? Let's review. Here are the key takeaways from Tinker versus Des Moines. Student free speech rights. The core takeaway is that students retain their First Amendment right to freedom of speech within a school setting, and that schools cannot prohibit student expression solely based on the fear of potential disruption as opposed to, quote, a substantial and material interference that actually disrupts educational activities. And next, this case recognized that the wearing of black armbands as a form of symbolic speech, and symbolic speech is protected under the First Amendment. In essence, the Tinker case set a precedent for student free speech rights, emphasizing that schools cannot arbitrarily restrict student expression and must demonstrate a genuine and substantial disruption to justify any restrictions, such as suspension. Hey, thanks for listening. Join us again on FCLE Seminar, a Florida Civic Literacy Exam podcast, so you can start studying for your test. The important thing is to start studying and study like a rock star. Hey, like, subscribe, or leave your questions or comments for us at FCLE Seminar on YouTube or Spotify. This podcast is listener-supported. Contributions can be made via the listener support link on Spotify, or you can buy me a coffee via the link in the show notes. This is your host, Mercedes Musto. Join me again on FCLE Seminar, a Florida Civic Literacy Exam podcast, so you can pass the FCLE.